Ascent Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents HBR Guide to Unlocking Creativity by Harvard Business Review. Narrated by Lyle Blaker and Kitty Hendrix. Publisher's Note: this audiobook has bonus material. Please contact whomever you purchased this audiobook from to request the material. All figures and tables referenced in this audiobook can be found in the bonus material. What you'll learn. When you picture a creative person, who pops into your head? Is it a well-known CEO? A famous performer, artist, scientist, or architect? Or maybe someone you know comes to mind. A co-worker on the design team, an old classmate who was always effortlessly fashionable, or your friend whose social posts get the most likes. Here's the thing. These individuals are impressive and inspiring, but they don't own a monopoly on creativity. You don't need to be the next Steve Jobs, Beyoncé, Jack Ma, or Zaha Hadid to be an innovator. Nor do you need to work in a certain department or industry. There's less that separates you from creatives than you might think, and no matter who you are or what you do in your job, you can learn to unlock your own inherent creative capacity and bring it to your work. No matter what business you're in, you need new perspectives and novel ways of doing things to keep pace with your competitors and set yourself apart. That's why a creative mindset is now one of the most sought-after traits for leaders. Without it, your organization will be stuck in neutral. Creativity makes innovation possible. You're not alone if you feel some hesitancy around proposing something different or encouraging others to be creative. Many of us, because of our culture, education, or work experience, have been taught that logical and practical thinking are the keys to success. Too often, we may feel that managers and organizational culture can stifle our best new ideas. Many creative approaches never see the light of day because they don't fit easily into a P&L. But the level of complexity and the speed of change in business today are too high. You cannot simply recycle the old ways of doing things. You can, and must, set the right conditions for creativity to thrive around you. And you need to be part of the process yourself. The HBR Guide to Unlocking Creativity will help you and your team change how you think, innovate together, and achieve original results that will make you an inspiration to others. You will learn to overcome the fears that block your best ideas, understand when to take a break and when to push through, balance creativity with productivity, brainstorm for better questions, not just solutions, revive your imagination when you're stressed or just in a rut, model curiosity for your team, understand when to switch from divergent thinking to convergent thinking, give and receive feedback about creative work, collaborate for creativity in remote and hybrid workplaces, cultivate the psychological safety needed for unguarded expression, use design thinking to generate new solutions, build a culture of originality, bring breakthrough ideas to life. Introduction. Creativity, not just for creatives. We all know the feeling of entering a room where all the joy and exuberance of creativity and open-minded thinking dried up years ago. We feel it the most when we're dealing with old systems and giant bureaucracies, things like filing an insurance claim or applying for an extended travel visa. The experience is withering and exhausting, and we feel a mix of sympathy and derision for its enforcers. Those robotic paper pushers who never seem to stray from their scripts or fail to apply outdated rules. Most of us today, luckily, work in organizations where innovation is encouraged and celebrated. Even so, that creativity-crushing feeling creeps into our jobs all too often. The forces that smother creativity and lead to rigid, defensive feelings are quiet and sly. They might show up as a manager who steals your good ideas, as strategy sessions that are exercises in groupthink, or as a culture of busyness that leaves no time for deep thinking. Everyday problems such as these are likely making it harder for your team to generate original ideas and new solutions. And the longer you spend in this kind of culture, the more your own creative juices are going to dry up too. The good news is that there are steps you can take today to rekindle your creativity. What's more, any team or organization can do the same. The chapters in this guide bring together some of HBR's most practical, actionable, and thought-provoking articles on these topics. They provide a variety of approaches to unlocking creativity in yourself and your team so that you can see things differently, spark innovation, and solve tough problems. Throughout the book, you'll see that creativity experts and researchers agree on several observations. 1. There aren't creative people and uncreative people. Everyone is born creative and can be creative given the right opportunities. 2. Creativity seldom springs forth from solitary light bulb moments. It's more likely to come from creative collaboration that combines ideas and insights in unexpected ways. 3. Creativity fuels innovation. It allows you and your team to see beyond what exists now to what might be, helping your organization evolve and grow. Beyond this starting point, though, you'll see that there is no single foolproof playbook for creativity. Some of the authors in this guide will encourage you to reflect. They'll ask you to examine yourself and the mindsets that might be holding you back in your efforts to be creative, whether that's a fear of failure, being in a rut, or just working under constant stress. Others will urge you to look at what's impeding creative collaboration on your team. You might, for example, be running the wrong kind of brainstorm, struggle to ensure psychological safety on your team, or simply have too many similar people in your meetings. Start thinking differently by letting yourself listen to this guide in any order. Don't just start at the beginning and listen to it from beginning to end. Consider the chapter titles. Notice a title that catches your attention. Skip ahead and then jump back. Notice what is important to you and take notes. If the book helps you come up with a single breakthrough, or if it helps your team get unstuck or reach a better outcome, then your time listening to this guide is well spent. The articles in Section 1, Unleash Your Creativity, will help you assess yourself and understand where you are on your journey of creative growth. It begins with Reclaim Your Creative Confidence, a chapter by 2 D-School professors who show you how to examine and get over the fears that are blocking your best ideas. Throughout the section, you'll learn to give your brain the exercise it needs, how to spark creativity when you're stressed or in a rut, and why you need to look outside your industry for fresh solutions. The right kind of brainstorming can generate incredible new ideas, but the wrong kind can actually produce fewer good ideas than people working by themselves. Section 2, Brainstorming and Beyond, encourages you to move past the old standard tactics and learn about brainstorming for questions, story thinking, brainstorming, and ways to make virtual brainstorming even more effective than in-person techniques. Spend extra time in this section if you want to add a few more idea generation skills to your repertoire. Ultimately, getting good ideas onto the whiteboard is only a start. To put creative solutions into action, your team needs to learn to innovate together. Section 3, Creative Collaboration, shows you how to set the conditions for team creativity, how to balance psychological safety with diverse viewpoints, and how to give feedback to others about their creative work. Listen to all the chapters in this section if you already have plenty of ideas but want to combine, refine, and hone them. The final section, Make Your Organization More Creative, zooms out to look at how small changes in culture can have a huge impact on problem solving. These chapters explore how everyone in a company, from individual contributors to managers to leaders, can adjust their approach to celebrate curiosity, adopt a growth mindset around innovation, and build a culture of originality. Late in this guide, organizational psychologist and creativity guru Adam Grant describes his mission to find innovators in what he thought was the least likely organization. If there's one place on Earth where originality goes to die, I'd managed to find it. I was charged with unleashing innovation and change in the ultimate bastion of bureaucracy. It was a place where people accepted defaults without question, followed rules without explanation, and clung to traditions and technologies long after they'd become obsolete. The U.S. Navy. Amazingly, though, when Grant continued to explore there, he found much more creativity than he had expected. These creative solutions weren't coming from the top down, they were bubbling up from a network of original thinkers throughout the organization, and leadership was encouraging these thinkers to question long-held assumptions. Even in the biggest, most complex companies, creativity can start with you. And the higher you are on the org chart, the more you can enable others to reach their own creative potential. If your organization, or even just a dull standing meeting, feels like a creative wasteland today, don't assume that it can't become a grove of innovative ideas tomorrow. Keep listening and start watering the soil now. Section 1. Unleash your creativity. Chapter 1. Reclaim Your Creative Confidence by Tom Kelly and David Kelly. Most people are born creative. As children, we revel in imaginary play, ask outlandish questions, draw blobs and call them dinosaurs. But over time, because of socialization and formal education, a lot of us start to stifle those impulses. We learn to be warier of judgment, more cautious, more analytical. The world seems to be divided into creatives and non-creatives, and too many people consciously or unconsciously resign themselves to the latter category. And yet we know that creativity is essential to success in any discipline or industry. According to an IBM survey of chief executives around the world, it's the most sought-after trait in leaders. No one can deny that creative thinking has enabled the rise and continued success of countless companies, from startups to stalwarts. Students often come to Stanford University's D School, which was founded by one of us, David, and is formally known as the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design, to develop their creativity. Clients work with IDEO, our design and innovation consultancy, for the same reason. But along the way, we've learned that our job isn't to teach them creativity. It's to help them rediscover their creative confidence, the natural ability to come up with new ideas, and the courage to try them out. We do this by giving them strategies to get past 4 fears that hold most of us back. Fear of the messy unknown, fear of being judged, fear of the first step, fear of losing control. Easier said than done, you might argue. But we know it's possible for people to overcome even their most deep-seated fears. Consider the work of Albert Bandura, a world-renowned psychologist and Stanford professor. In one series of early experiments, he helped people conquer lifelong snake phobias by guiding them through a series of increasingly demanding interactions. They would start by watching a snake through a 2-way mirror. Once comfortable with that, they'd progress to observing it through an open door, then to watching someone else touch the snake, then to touching it themselves through a heavy leather glove, and finally, in a few hours, to touching it with their own bare hands. Bandura calls this process of experiencing one small success after another guided mastery. The people who went through it weren't just cured of a debilitating fear they had assumed was untreatable, they also had less anxiety and more success in other parts of their lives, taking up new and potentially frightening activities like horseback riding and public speaking. They tried harder, persevered longer, and had more resilience in the face of failure. They had gained a new confidence in their ability to attain what they set out to do. We've used much the same approach over the past 30 years to help people transcend the fears that block their creativity. You break challenges down into small steps and then build confidence by succeeding on one step after another. Creativity is something you practice, not just a talent you're born with. The process may feel a little uncomfortable at first, but As the snake-phobics learned, the discomfort quickly fades away and is replaced with new confidence and capabilities. Fear of the messy unknown. Creative thinking in business begins with having empathy for your customers, whether they're internal or external, and you can't get that sitting behind a desk. Yes, we know it's cozy in your office. Everything is reassuringly familiar. Information comes from predictable sources. Contradictory data is weeded out and ignored. But out in the world, it's more chaotic. You have to deal with unexpected findings, with uncertainty, and with irrational people who say things you don't want to hear. But that is where you find insights and creative breakthroughs. Venturing forth in pursuit of learning, even without a hypothesis, can open you up to new information and help you discover non-obvious needs. Otherwise, you risk simply reconfirming ideas you've already had or waiting for others, your customers, your boss, or even your competitors, to tell you what to do. At the D-School, we routinely assign students to do this sort of anthropological fieldwork, to get out of their comfort zones and into the world until suddenly they start doing it on their own. Consider a computer scientist, 2 engineers, and an MBA student, all of whom took the Design for Extreme Affordability class taught by Stanford Business School professor Jim Patel. The students eventually realized that they couldn't complete their group project to research and design a low-cost incubator for newborn babies in the developing world while living in safe suburban California. So they gathered their courage and visited rural Nepal. Talking with families and doctors firsthand, they learned that the babies in gravest danger were those born prematurely in areas far from hospitals. Nepalese villagers didn't need a cheaper incubator at the hospital. They needed a fail-safe way to keep babies warm when they lived far from doctors who could do so effectively. Those insights led the team to design a miniature sleeping bag with a pouch containing a special heat-storing wax. The Embrace infant warmer costs 99% less than a traditional incubator and can maintain the right temperature for up to 6 hours with no external power source. The innovation has the potential to save millions of low birth weight and premature babies every year, and it came about only because the team members were willing to throw themselves into unfamiliar territory. Another example comes from Akshay Katari and Ankit Gupta, 2 students who took the D-School's Launchpad course. The class required them to start a company from scratch by the end of the 10-week academic quarter. Both were self-described geeks, technically brilliant, deeply analytical, and definitely shy. But they opted to work on their project, an elegant newsreader for the then newly released iPad, off campus in a Palo Alto cafe where they'd be surrounded by potential users. Getting over the awkwardness of approaching strangers, Katari gathered feedback by asking cafe patrons to experiment with his prototypes. Gupta coded hundreds of small variations to be tested each day, changing everything from interaction patterns to the size of a button. In a matter of weeks, he and Katari rapidly iterated their way to a successful product. We went from people saying, "This is crap," says Katari, to, "Is this app preloaded on every iPad?" The result? Pulse News received public praise from Steve Jobs at a worldwide developers conference only a few months later and is one of the original 50 apps in Apple's App Store Hall of Fame. It's not just entrepreneurs and product developers who should get into the mess. Senior managers must also hear directly from anyone affected by their decisions. For instance, midway through a management offsite that IDEO held for ConAgra Foods, the executives broke away from their upscale conference rooms to explore gritty Detroit neighborhoods, where you can go miles without seeing a grocery store. They personally observed how the residents of these neighborhoods reacted to food products, and the executives spoke with an urban farmer who hopes to turn abandoned lots into community gardens. Now, according to Al Bowles, ConAgra's Executive Vice President of Research, Quality, and Innovation, such behavior is common at the company. "A few years ago," he says, "it was hard to pry my executive team away from the office. But now we venture out and get onto our customers' home turf to get insights about what they really need. Tackling the Mess Right Now by Caroline O'Connor and Sarah Stein Greenberg. You can work up the confidence to tackle the big fears that hold most of us back by starting small. Here are a few ways to get comfortable with venturing into the messy unknown. The list gets increasingly challenging, but you can follow the first 2 suggestions without even leaving your desk. Lurk in online forums. Listen in as potential customers share information, air grievances, and ask questions. It's the virtual equivalent of hanging around a popular cafe. You're not looking for evaluations of features or costs. You're searching for clues about people's concerns and desires. Pick up the phone and call your own company's customer service line. Walk through the experience as if you were a customer, noting how your problem is handled and how you're feeling along the way. Seek out an unexpected expert. What does the receptionist in your building know about your firm's customer experience? If you use a car service for work travel, what insights do the drivers have about your firm? If you're in healthcare, talk to a medical assistant, not a doctor. If you make a physical product, ask a repair person to tell you about common failure areas. Act like a spy. Take a magazine and a pair of headphones to a store or an industry conference. Or, if your customers are internal, a break room or lunch area. Pretend to read while you observe. Watch as if you were a kid trying to understand what is going on. How are people interacting with your offering? What can you glean from their body language? Casually interview a customer or potential customer. After you've gotten more comfortable venturing out, try this. Write down a few open-ended questions about your product or service. Go to a place where your customers tend to gather. Find someone you'd be comfortable approaching and say you'd like to ask a few questions. If the person refuses, no problem, just try someone else. Eventually, you'll find someone who's dying to talk to you. Press for more detail with every question. Even if you think you understand, ask, "Why is that?" or "Can you tell me more about that?" Get people to dig into their own underlying assumptions. Fear of being judged. If the scribbling, singing, dancing kindergartner symbolizes unfettered creative expression, then the awkward teenager represents the opposite. Someone who cares, deeply, about what other people think. It takes only a few years to develop that fear of judgment, but it stays with us throughout our adult lives, often constraining our careers. Most of us accept that when we are learning, say, to ski, others will see us fall down until practice pays off. But we can't risk our business world ego in the same way. As a result, we self-edit, killing potentially creative ideas because we're afraid our bosses or peers will see us fail. We stick to safe solutions or suggestions. We hang back, allowing others to take risks. But we can't be creative if we are constantly censoring ourselves. Half the battle is to resist judging yourself. If you can listen to your own intuition and embrace more of your own ideas, good and bad, you're already partway to overcoming this fear. So take baby steps, as Bandura's clients did. Instead of letting thoughts run through your head and down the drain, capture them systematically in some form of idea notebook. Keep a whiteboard and marker in the shower. Schedule daily white space in your calendar, where your only task is to think or take a walk and daydream. When you try to generate ideas, shoot for 100 instead of 10. Defer your own judgment, and you'll be surprised at how many ideas you have, and by the end of the week. Also, try using new language when you give feedback, and encourage your collaborators to do the same. At the D School, our feedback typically starts with, "I like," and moves on to, "I wish," instead of just passing judgment with put-downs like, "That will never work." Opening with the positives and then using the first person for suggestions signals that this is just my opinion and I want to help, a message that makes listeners more receptive to your ideas. We recently worked with Air New Zealand to reinvent the customer experience for its long-distance flights. As a highly regulated industry, airlines tend toward conservatism. To overcome the cultural norm of skepticism and caution, we started with a workshop aimed at generating wild ideas. Executives brainstormed and prototyped a dozen unconventional and some seemingly impractical concepts, including harnesses that hold people standing up, groups of seats facing one another around a table, and even hammocks and bunk beds. With everyone coming up with these ideas, no one was scared of being judged. This willingness to consider wild notions and defer judgment eventually led the Air New Zealand team to a creative breakthrough: the Sky Couch, a lie-flat seat for economy class. At first it seemed impossible that such a seat could be made without enlarging its footprint. Seats in business and first-class cabins take up much more space, but the new design does just that. A heavily padded section swings up like a footrest to transform an airline row into a futon-like platform that a couple can lie down on together. The Sky Couch is now featured on a number of Air New Zealand's international flights, and the company has won several industry awards as a result. Fear of the first step. Even when we want to embrace our creative ideas, acting on them presents its own challenges. Creative efforts are hardest at the beginning. The writer faces the blank page, the teacher the start of school, business people the first day of a new project. In a broader sense, we're also talking about fear of charting a new path or breaking out of your predictable workflow. To overcome this inertia, you need more than good ideas. You need to stop planning and just get started. And the best way to do that is to stop focusing on the huge overall task and find a small piece you can tackle right away. Best-selling writer Anne Lamott expertly captures this idea in a story from her childhood. Her brother had been assigned a school report about birds, but he waited to start on it until the night before it was due. He was near tears, overwhelmed by the task ahead, until his father gave him some wise advice. Bird by bird, buddy. Just take it bird by bird. In a business context, you can push yourself to take the first step by asking, what is the low-cost experiment? What's the quickest, cheapest way to make progress toward the larger goal? Or give yourself a ridiculous deadline, as John Keefe, a D-School alum and a senior editor at radio station WNYC did after a colleague complained that her mom had to wait at city bus stops, never knowing when the next bus would come. If you worked for New York City Transit Authority and your boss asked you to solve that problem, how soon would you promise to get a system up and running? 6 weeks? 10? Keefe, who doesn't work for the Transit Authority, said, "Give me till the end of the day." He bought an 800 number, figured out how to access real-time bus data, and linked it to text-to-speech technology. Within 24 hours, he had set up a service that allowed bus riders to call in, input their bus stop number, and hear the location of the approaching bus. Keefe applies the same fearless attitude to his work at WNYC. The most effective way I found to practice design thinking is by showing, not telling, he explains. Another example of the start simple strategy comes from an IDEO project to develop a new dashboard feature for a European luxury car. To test their ideas, designers videotaped an existing car and then used digital effects to layer on proposed features. The rapid prototyping process took less than a week. When the team showed the video to our client, he laughed. "Last time we did something like this," he said, "we built a prototype car, which took almost a year and cost over $1 million. Then we took a video of it. You skipped the car and went straight to the video." Our mantra is, don't get ready, get started. The first step will seem much less daunting if you make it a tiny one and force yourself to do it right now. Rather than stalling and allowing your anxiety to build, just start inching toward the snake. Fear of losing control. Confidence doesn't simply mean believing that your ideas are good. It means having the humility to let go of ideas that aren't working and to accept good ideas from other people. When you abandon the status quo and work collaboratively, you sacrifice control over your product, your
Sample complete. Ready to continue?